meetings. Nothing needed to be changed, because I knew that Ahmad Qabazard, God rest his soul, would never talk.
On the morning of September the 5th, at about 6:30, I was still in bed when I was surprised by Iraqi troops who stormed into the house. There were about 200 Republican guards in about 50 vehicles. They were special forces in full uniform. They even had RPGs and bazookas with them. "What's going on?" I asked the commanding officer, whose name was Lieutenant Muhsin. He then accused me of being in the resistance and said, amongst other things, that my home was full of weapons. Of course, I denied all this and said that his soldiers had simply disturbed a man peacefully sleeping in his bed, and that resistance members would not be found in their beds at 6:30 a.m. They would most probably be out on a mission. To be brief, he let me know that an order had been given for my execution and that I should go outside with him. After having been dragged out, I noticed a pickup truck parked at the front gate. The machine gun mount in the rear of the truck had been removed and a chair put in its place. Ahmed sat on the chair, looking unperturbed. I remember the scene so well, and it fills me with pride for him. There was Ahmed Qabazard, tied to the chair, his hands bound. Yet he kept almost a regal disposition, despite the fact that he'd been severely tortured. The marks were clearly visible. You could see blood all over his head and neck and stomach areas, down to his legs. Nevertheless, judging by the manner in which he sat, the injuries were only external. Internally, he looked very strong, and even the Iraqi soldiers who were acting as his escort seemed very much in awe of him. They knew that 10 or even 20 soldiers were not enough to inspire fear in him. That's why they had come in such numbers. The hero, Ahmed Qabazard, seated in the back of the pickup outside the door of my house. He was wearing a green T-shirt and white trousers, and they'd covered his head and ears with an undershirt, using it as a headdress. It was stuck to his ears and neck, where the blood was excessive. It should be noted, however, that at no time did he moan or let out a cry of pain. Yet, in my opinion, I really do not know how any human being could have been able to withstand such physical and mental abuse. He remained silent and proud, and I think his pride was for his nation and for his fellow freedom fighters. My son Osama and I were pointed out to him. He shook his head and said, "I do not know them." They then showed him our ID cards, since they had photographs of us in formal attire, whilst right then we were facing him in pajamas. Again, he denied all knowledge of us, and this was another heroic gesture that I will never forget, because he saved all our lives. One nod of his head would have brought calamity upon our whole household. And this was another heroic gesture that I will never forget, because he saved all our lives. One nod of his head would have brought calamity upon our whole household.
I didn't know Ahmed before the invasion. I met him when, after my arrest, I was transferred to Jara. Ahmed was there, and that was the very first time I had seen him. He was one of the first people I got to know there. I remember being taken to a room where he and many others were being kept prisoners. He called me over as I went in and asked me why I had been arrested. I told him, and then I, in my turn, asked him why he was there. He didn't answer, but only warned me against confessing to anything. He said I'd be beaten anyway, so there was no point in confessing. One night, they took us out of the room. I was taken first and escorted upstairs, where they started beating me. Then they suspended me from the ceiling, hands tied behind my back, like this. My blindfold had slipped slightly off my eyes.
بعد فترة يودش دخلوا كانت مبطلة عيني أنا كنت قاعد طالع القاية.
After a while, they brought Ahmed in and started beating him continuously.
حطوا شي ريلة أصابع ريلة حطونهم على مثل.
They then put his toes on a small metal table, and they kept pounding away at the toenails so that it would raise from the flesh. He was the only detainee beaten in front of me who never once cried out or uttered a word. I mean, I saw them ripping off 2 of his toenails. 2, not 1. He didn't say anything, not a word, but I remember him hitting his head on the floor from the pain. Not a word was breathed, and they respected him for it, all of them. The same people who would blindfold him and beat him showed great respect when he was in the room. I mean, they really...
His extraordinary willpower left his captors defeated and frustrated. It was a frustration that would somehow have to be...
I was sleeping when I was awoken by the family shouting that Iraqi soldiers had surrounded Ahmed's house. I immediately went upstairs and looked out through this very window here. I could see that Iraqi troops had totally surrounded.
Soldiers came out laden with all sorts of electrical goods and clothes and foodstuffs, which, of course, they had rifled from the house. They took him out of the van and pulled him along, his feet dragging over the pavement.
From my post-mortem examination of him, it was clear that he had been badly tortured. There were marks on his wrists as if he had been tied with chains or ropes. Also, the finger and toenails had been ripped off. There was extensive bruising on his chest, thighs and back. On both arms there were wounds, perhaps made by a drill. Drilling was one of the most common torture methods used against the young resistance fighters. I also found 2 bullet holes, one in the back of the head, here, and it was bleeding, and another was located between the lower back of the neck and the shoulder.
He did what he had to do and more, and he was martyred so that the name of Kuwait could be written in blood, the blood of Ahmed Qabazard.